Hello and welcome to the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner, and this is part 2 with Dr. Larry King, President of FTCC, and Dr. James Anderson, Chancellor of Fayetteville State University. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we've been hearing whispers over the years that community college education may someday be free for students. Obama talked about this, of course, during his presidency. Would this not kill the freshman and sophomore populations at especially the smaller regional institutions like FSU and put these institutions out of business? Is this something that we should advocate or protest?
Well, first of all, that's a political question, I want to say. So there's no definitive answer, absolute answer to it. Just today I was watching CNN, and several of the Democratic candidates had to answer that question. And some said, let's make it absolutely free. Others said, no, we're not going to do that if I win the nomination. So there's varied opinions about it. I would say that, first of all, the students will benefit if it happens. And always we want things to be student-centered. So students would benefit. Would it harm some institutions in our state, for example? Yes, it would. Probably the smaller private institutions would be harmed more because they do generally charge more in terms of tuition. Because of the agreements that we have with FTCC, it wouldn't affect those agreements. The agreements would still stay strong, and the students would still transfer to us, or we'd still have the articulation agreements, et cetera. I'll let Larry speak to that.
Well, I think there's always a danger, and I think the proposal was well intended. Sometimes unintended consequences can take place, and so I think some students it would help dramatically. What I worry about, though, well, let me say this. There are already opportunities for students in many respects to get the first 2 years of college tuition free, and that's if they take the college classes while they're still in high school. Those are free of charge. And we have students that will get most, if not all, of their first 2 years while they're going concurrently in high school, and they're collegiate credit, and they do quite well, and then they transfer on and then will do what they need to do. So I think that's a good thing. So a lot of those things, a lot of those relationships that Dr. Anderson talked about earlier that we already have, the intention is this. I applaud it in some ways, but I also say that if a student really wants to go to school these days, really wants to go for a college education, whether 2 year, whether 4 year or beyond, that is available to them today. Now it takes sacrifice, it takes dedication, it takes discipline, but they can do it. The thing that I worry about, if it were free, absolutely free, no charge whatsoever, is that I believe that everyone needs to make some investment of their own into the process, because that helps teach discipline that is required throughout a person's life. And so having the proverbial skin in the game, I think, is a plus for students as opposed to just getting it automatically free. And so I think a combination of those things would work well. Do I think it would put colleges out of business? Some it might challenge, but you know, places like Fayetteville State University and others, I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, people go at the end of the day after value. They come to us because they see value in what they do, and so as long as value is maintained and a pathway to their opportunity that they seek is clear, then I think they're going to come regardless of whether they have to pay or not. I'm all for the Pell Grants and the other loan programs that are available to help students pursue their dreams. What I do worry is that if we make it so easy and so convenient that they really don't have to invest anything of themselves into that process, to include some degree of physical or financial resources, I'm afraid that in the long run it would hurt many of those students.
You know, at the end of the day, it really comes back to legislatures, state legislatures, or board of governor groups, or other kinds of boards, because they have to make up the money that they're going to lose. Okay, and that's not easy. So a lot of states do have reserves. They do have the monies where for a few years they can do that, but they probably can't continue doing it. You have other states that it's a little more difficult because they don't have the reserves, and they have other political issues they have to address financially. So that has to be looked at first before you talk to the institutions about it.
Now, certain politicians lately have argued that we should put more funding toward community colleges and technical schools because there's a growing deficit of skilled workers in America. Would that not mean less funding for traditional four-year institutions? Why can't we fund both?
Well, you can. You can. And you know, it's one of those questions where everything you asked was right. Yes. Do we need more? I mean, you know, we look at the economy now, the questions being asked about who do we need 5 years from now, who do we need 10 years from now. It's clear that we need more skilled workers at the level of maybe having associate degrees, four-year degrees, et cetera. What legislatures are wrestling with is that distribution of dollars, you know, to community college systems, to the UNC system. Now you have what, 58, 59 community colleges in North
58.
Carolina? 58 in North Carolina. You only have 17 four-year institutions, okay? So if the bulk of the dollars are given and distributed across 59, that's a much larger need than it is for us. But then we have graduate programs and other things that they don't have, okay? So it's something that you really have to hone and look at and make sure that, you know, you're addressing all the considerations for both systems.
I think you need to fund both. There are different perspectives, different requirements, as Chancellor has just said, different targets that you pursue in each of those categories. Now, I will be honest with you in telling you that the smallest portion of state budgets go to the community colleges. We're at about 8 to 9% of the total package in North Carolina, and that's pretty well true throughout the rest of the country. If you look at the largest benefactor of that, as it should be, it's the K through 12 systems. They by far get the biggest portion of the state dollar and federal dollar for that matter, because every child from the time they're very little on up to the time that they will transition and matriculate to a college or university, they touch that K through 12 system. The university system, we get about $1.4 billion a year to cover the needs of all of those 58 community colleges. I'm not sure what the university system is. Last count, I thought it was about 17 billion.
Yeah,
something like that. And so, but the nature of those things are different. Now, that doesn't mean to say what we are doing is less important. It says it's different. And then you go into some of our technical programs and some of our healthcare programs, and the per unit cost of that is dramatically more expensive than it would be if you were teaching English or history or government or something of that nature. So I think to consider what types of things that you're going to have to cover in addressing that skills gap is going to be an important part of the question. For us, if you're trying to educate people in terms of cybersecurity, or you're trying to do on systems, or you're trying to do healthcare, you're trying to do advanced manufacturing or things of that nature, those are typically low enrollment, high expense classes, the same as his graduate classes are. Typically low enrollment, high expense. And so there are some unique elements of each of those types of things that are extraordinarily expensive, and yet they accommodate different needs of the population to include the communities that receive those students as a workforce.
Yeah. I think there's one group that would benefit if it did happen, and that is prospective students in rural counties, you know, far rural counties out in western North Carolina, for example, or eastern North Carolina. It might be attractive to them. It might produce more of a motivation for them to want to get into, you know, this educational thing. And if we could just get them into the door and start motivating them, because they're going to return to their counties and, you know, provide some kind of skill set, some kind of advantage to their counties. So I think that's one group I would think could benefit from that.
Okay.
And I think we're trying to infuse in all of our people, regardless of where it's a community college system and or the universities, at least my friends that I communicate with in those realms, is that being far more entrepreneurial in what we're doing, because the things that they do and they learn, there are applications that they could take to the workforce every single day, whether they're working for someone or they're starting their own businesses or their own enterprises. And so the point being is that if we do that and do it effectively and aggressively across the board, they need to fund all of these things extremely well. It's always fascinated me that sometimes when they want to cut things, they cut to the very marrow of the thing that makes them strong in the first place, and unfortunately sometimes that's in education.
Exactly.
It's not just at the state level. If you compare things nationally and internationally, across the board, we've had dramatic cuts over the years, proportionately speaking, in funding for education across the board. And that's so unfortunate, because the very thing that makes us successful are our people. When we fail to invest in those people, we fail to invest in ourselves.
Dr. King, you're absolutely correct. Now, what kind of outreach does FSU do to FTCC students, and do you have any on-campus admissions advisor on the FTCC campus to help students? If not, is that allowed?
We try to place admissions advisors in different settings, whether it's on Fort Bragg, on the base, whether it's at FTCC, whether it might be somewhere else. And if we can't actually have a physical body there, then someone at FSU is assigned that community college and has a close working relationship with that community college. You need to have that, because I need to have someone there when students have particular questions about coming to FSU from FTCC. You have to have someone there who can answer it just like that. See, the longer you wait for they wait for an answer, then the sooner they'll forget to even think about you.
And we'll go somewhere else.
And go somewhere else.
They will, and that's what I alluded to earlier about winning the hearts and minds of those students. They will find the people that are going to respond to them and help them, so that in our place at FTCC, we literally assign rooms to people from FSU to come in there, and that's where they reside. Now, I am just like the Chancellor. I'll walk around that campus, and if I see empty rooms, I start asking why. And if I don't get a good answer, then I make changes. But we have always and are continuing to provide multiple opportunities and spaces for people to come and answer the very questions the Chancellor just alluded to. It's one of those things, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. There are some students that are going to go to wherever they want to go regardless of what you do. But there are so many others that need to make those connections with real people in a real place in real time, and that's the value of what we do in providing spaces on an ongoing basis. We also have situations where we bring students over here. They interact with faculty, they interact with your students. What do you call your male mentoring program? We've partnered with them. We put on conferences together. They've been at ours, we've been at theirs. We've acknowledged and recognized them, and they've done the same for us. It's the greatest thing for young men who might otherwise be lost to come together to see that there is a brighter future if they'll work together. That's what our two institutions do consistently.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. All right. So I hear that FSU and FTCC have both hosted recent events at your campuses, inviting advisors and instructors from each to converse and get to know each other. So tell us about this, and how is this meant to help the students?
Well, the last one I attended was a luncheon over in our student center, and it worked really, really well. I mean, because for many of the people from both groups, that was the first time they even connected with the other group. So that was the first thing that was important. But we got a chance to each ask and answer different questions. Some questions really were good probing questions. Some were just technical questions, okay? But it gave us a chance to really understand, I think, the philosophy of each institution as it pertains to having our relationship with FTCC. So I'd like to do it a lot more.
Oh, okay. Dr. King?
I would as well. The thought that came to mind as the Chancellor was responding to your question is this: we're such a Moby-centric population here. We're mobile. We are moving all the time. People are coming in, people are leaving. And so the old state idea that you can just, people just know you because you've been there forever, no, that doesn't work here. And so it's a constant effort to stay on top of this and inform people of what's available. So the more we're able to get together to show that there are legitimate avenues of opportunity here in our community, the better off we're all going to be, and most importantly, those students are going to be. So that's one of the things that we try to do consistently, and I agree with the Chancellor, we should be doing more of it.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. King and Dr. Anderson, I thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful segment.
Thank you.
I'd just like to end by saying, there's one group that we don't talk about enough, and that's minority males. Nationally, whether you're talking about community colleges or four-year institutions, minority males are underperforming more so than any group. And I think both institutions and all institutions in North Carolina really need to have a more dedicated effort to making them succeed.
I agree. We've renewed our effort for that very reason.
Right.
It's a ticking time bomb in this nation. If we don't get a handle on that, we're going to have a problem.
Amen. Thank you, viewing audience, for watching the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner. Have a good one.
But now you're stranger, oh, got me so very much much hypnotized. Familiar stranger, stranger. Wait, hold up, don't run, I don't bite. Familiar stranger, who got me so very much hypnotized. Familiar stranger, stranger. Wait, hold up, don't